and thank you for having me here tonight. I am the odd person out here on this Bright Club stage because I'm the historian. Whoa. Don't worry, I do seem a bit out of place being a historian at the Manchester Science Festival, but as a Canadian, I'm pretty used to people thinking I'm irrelevant anyway, so I think I'm going to be okay. So I'm a historian of science, actually, one of my hats. And historians of science like to think that they try to keep scientists in check every now and then, pointing out every time they get something wrong, or even every time they get something really wrong. You know, there is a delay, though, between a scientific experiment and historical analysis of that experiment. So we're sort of like that terrible friend that everybody has who waits until you put pictures on Facebook to tell you that actually, yes, your ass does look fat in those jeans. Worst friend ever. But I do study something very close to every scientist's heart. Scientists have hearts, right? Right? Okay. I study the corporate manipulation of science via research grants or access funding. In short, I study evil scientists. You know, the Michaels of the crowd, right? Sorry, people. Because it's Halloween, I think we should try to think, maybe they're not evil after all. Maybe they're just simply misunderstood. Right? So I study something that kills over 4,000 people each year in the UK. And surprisingly, it's not a Tory government's welfare cuts. Getting political. It also kills over 90,000 people worldwide. And no, it's not the British Empire. Anymore, right? Am I right? Yeah, I'm right. However, like the British Empire, this is something that people once thought was magical and would save them from outside unknown dangers. Now, of course, everyone knows it to be a symbol of human arrogance and the dangers of modern society, I suppose. So, let's all take another deep breath. I know Ben started you off, but I don't want you to lower expectations. Deep breath in, and I'll tell you that I study asbestos. And yes, every one of us in this room has asbestos fibers lodged in our lungs, just from existing in major cities like Manchester, home of the first person to die of asbestos-related disease. Famous! So we all have it in our lungs, just from existing in places like Manchester, where old buildings full of bad insulation, cement, tiles, shingles, everything just leaches into the air, and we breathe it in like the fools that we are. Yay! However, just because we breathe it in doesn't mean that it's not good for us. Oh wait, no, it's not good for us. Let's stop. It's unavoidable, and you better believe it's as Canadian as Celine Dion off her face on maple syrup. Canada has historically been the world's top supplier of asbestos. It's a little known fact about my little country, my big little country, I suppose. And so we were the top supplier, and I study a small town in the French part of Canada that had the world's largest asbestos mine at the center of it. It's not an easy life in this kind of a town. Do you know what it's called? It just goes by the little name of Asbestos Canada. Here's a lovely little picture of the town. It's got a 2-kilometer wide open pit in the center of it, and it is a fabulous vacation destination. This is the cover of my forthcoming book, coming out in December, A Town Called Asbestos, and it makes an excellent Christmas present. Now, asbestos, of course, is not the most imaginative of place names, although this is the country that called a place Newcastle, so you understand me here. At least when you see it on a map, you know what to expect there, right? Since the collapse of the industry, it looks like this, a big mine in the middle, but it also has a greenhouse tomato factory. Ooh. The ketchup made from asbestos tomatoes is surprisingly good at putting out fires. It's always good to have in the house, so check your labels. So, that's, you know what, please visit asbestos, they need you, they're done. The town of asbestos has historically been the epicenter of the global asbestos trade, and it promised international markets that, unlike other places in the world, it had a safe and friendly type of asbestos that wouldn't give you cancer if it tried. Although, of course, it wouldn't try, because to try would be un-Canadian. This claim, of course, was supported by science. More specifically, it was supported by a network of international sinister corporations throwing money at researchers to prove the bonkers claim that Canadian asbestos was safer than asbestos from other parts of the world. It's just something that they like to do. So companies like the American Johns Manville Company, which owned the mine in asbestos, or even Manchester's very own sinister corporation, Turner and Newell, threw money at researchers to do these kind of studies on the condition that they could edit any report the researchers came out with before it was published. So is that a pretty standard thing that scientists agree to do? Michael, is it? So this is the plan. So for 20 years, these corporations wanted to find out what exactly Canadian asbestos did do to the human body, but they wanted to do so in secret just in case it turned out badly. They knew it was going to be bad. So they paid researchers to secretly autopsy the lungs of dead Canadian asbestos miners, put them in car boots, drive them across the American border, and study them in secret laboratories alongside those of mice and guinea pigs. And good on you, Bright Club crowd, for... Hello? Oh, good on you, Bright Club crowd, for not laughing at that, because we would have had to shut down the whole show. That was terrible. Obviously, it was terrible. However, to be sympathetic once again, I understand scientists. It's hard out there for a pimp, isn't it? It really is. And when funding dries up and you're in the middle of a project, you may be tempted to take funding from unsavory corporations in order to survive. And to be honest, if someone offered me £1 million to say that Nutella offered a healthy breakfast to children, I'd sign that contract. I would. Yes, and so also, just because it was a secret lab and they were stealing lungs doesn't mean important work wasn't being done at these places. Indeed, these scientists found through the stolen lungs that Canadian asbestos actually did cause cancer. Uh-oh, surprise, surprise. This directly contradicted everything the industry had been saying for the previous decades. Prior to this, everyone had just thought that asbestos, much like Canada, was just mildly annoying. Turns out it kills people, like Canada. So, after this discovery, things stayed pretty much the same, to be honest, because you bet your boots the companies that paid for this research and therefore owned the research would not release it to the general public or to their workforce. They just sat on it a bit. The families of these deceased Canadian miners never found out their loved ones were missing their lungs or that they had died of cancer. As for the scientists, oh, those poor fellows, well, they slept very well at night on beds made entirely of money. and partially made of stolen lungs, which are very comfortable, actually. Surprisingly comfortable. So when I found out this history of stolen lungs and secret autopsies, I thought I was the next Erin Brockovich. If, of course, Erin Brockovich had waited 50 to 60 years to tell everyone that their water was killing them. Historians are the absolute worst. And this is where we get a little bit Dr. Frankenstein, because no matter how rich these asbestos companies were, or how well connected, or how misunderstood these genius researchers thought they were, their horrific monster was going to emerge in society eventually, and it was going to take them down. That's just what happens, as a warning to each and every one of you. So, throughout this whole myth of Canadian asbestos being safe was pretty much maintained by science, corrupt science, let's say, until the mid-1970s, which is super late, actually. Before then, these asbestos companies just kept raking profits in while the workers died around them. Good times, right? Good times. However, not all was well with the industry, and signs of society gradually turning away from this fireproof magic mineral were seen in the emergence of a new supervillain coming out with Marvel's comics. I don't know if anyone's a fan of Marvel. Woo! Little fans. But in the 1940s, a new supervillain emerged on the scene. And while you won't see this character in an X-Men movie, you better believe she's just as cool as that guy with the magnetic head. So, Victoria Murdoch was a real smart cookie. A fictional smart cookie, but a real one at that. She was an American scientist, and she was a real trailblazer, constantly striving in her ambition to be evil. And so, possibly because of a failed funding bid, Victoria Murdoch developed a real love for robbing banks. Science is expensive, eh? It is. She also developed a real hatred for one of Marvel's most beloved characters, the Human Torch. How could you hate a face like this? I don't know. And so she weighed up her options, and she said, the right scientific decision is to dress myself head to toe in asbestos, carry around a gun that shot asbestos bullets, and assume the alias, Asbestos Lady. And yes, this is a real Marvel supervillain, Asbestos Lady. She's an early Jean Grey Phoenix character, but she was evil. And I actually have her little figure here in the original packaging. And the person I bought this from thought I was really weird. So, like a historian who tells you your butt looks big after you post the photos to Facebook, Asbestos Lady was a pretty terrible supervillain. Oh sure, if she shot you with her asbestos bullets, they would kill you, but they would take 20 to 30 years to do so. Worst villain ever. Her story began in the 1940s, back when lungs were free to be stolen and asbestos was safe to wrap your baby in. Just saying. While she never attained the fame of the Mystiques or the Magnetos of the Marvel Universe, she was a working evil scientist / supervillain for a good portion of the 20th century. Yes, that is a baby in an asbestos tiger outfit. So she was a working villain, and a lot of her storyline revolved around the fact that she got funding from sinister corporations, including the American government. Now seriously, even in fiction, those guys can't be trusted. Am I right? I'm right. So, by the 1970s, Asbestos Lady's loyal fans began to realize that, as earnest as her pursuit of research funding may have been at the start, her decision to dress herself entirely in asbestos was perhaps unwise. Hello? Ah, it just likes to keep me on my toes. It's okay. And so, I will say that, where was I? My goodness. Anyone? Oh yes, Asbestos Lady counts herself as the only Marvel supervillain to die, not because of an Avenger or an X-Men, but because of mesothelioma, which is a very aggressive cancer caused by exposure to asbestos! Yes, exactly. She fictionally died in 1990. This is part of her storyline after a long illness. And of course, after the Western world had fully realized the dangers asbestos posed to human health. So it was very convenient here. So that was an early sign for these asbestos companies that things weren't going well. And so all of this talk of evil scientists and supervillains makes me wonder a little bit. If what nutritionists say is right, and we are what we eat, is it also possible to be what we study? While I'll never be an evil scientist, mostly because I don't have a degree in science, and I never will, I'm about one failed funding application away from dressing head to toe in asbestos and making my mark on the scene. You know what, during my PhD, my supervisor may have foreseen this future of mine because he started to call me Jess Asbestos. Okay, I called him Alan. It was equal. So I will say that Jess Festos won't be as reckless or as evil as Asbestos Lady was. After all, I'm a historian, and I learn from the mistakes of the past. And so as a historian, I know I've got a good 20 to 30 years before disease kicks in, before I have to be really concerned. And I have enough faith in science to believe that by that time, science will have developed a cure, or at least replacement lungs. And I'll be super rich from all the banks I've robbed, so I'll be able to afford them. So this is again Asbestos Lady, and she is my inspiration. I've got my new alias. I've got a country full of friendly asbestos back home. I have Asbestos Lady's ghost behind me, and of course,